Okay. Well, I'm Caitlin Moore. I'm the Financial Literacy Manager here at Union Bank, and today we're in our second webinar about our red flags. So these are things that we should have red flags about when it comes to our finances. So today we're going to be talking about collections and the process of how collections work in various ways. I do want to just put out a disclaimer that this is very UBT oriented. Everybody is a little bit different when it comes to collections, but here at UBT, we do a lot of collections, our own collections. The process at other banks or companies are very similar, but some of the things that we're going to talk about are very specific to UBT. But we'll still get the general idea out there of how collections works. Here we go. So what are debt collectors? So we kind of have some interchangeable terms here, debt collection or collections, same thing. So it's the process of recovering money owed to the bank by its customers. So that's what we're doing here at UBT, and other banks such as, Wells Fargo, US Bank, they're gonna try to at least recover some of the money that's owed to them through the collections process. So part of my disclaimer here is every company deals with collections a little bit differently. A lot of this is UBT specific, but if you do have collections or have questions about specific companies, feel free to call them, always call them and ask specific questions. And one of the things I'll say at the beginning when it comes to collections, communication is going to be key for anybody, whether it's something you saw on your credit report. A lot of times people will pull their credit, even with Credit Karma, so a soft pull, and they'll see that they have a collections debt and they don't realize it's there. This happens all the time, that people don't realize it. And it may be for something small like a phone bill or a heating bill, but they don't realize it's gone to collection. So being communicative with the company or the provider is going to be key when it comes to your credit and rebuilding that credit, or that where a couple points may have been taken off. Let's talk about medical debt. Medical debt can go into collections, and it often does. Here at UBT, we have this really great connection with Bryan Health, where we actually do their collections for them. So we have UBT Patient Finance Program. When you have a medical bill, whether it's at Bryan or some other hospital, so anywhere, and you can't pay the bill, it's very, very important that you call and make arrangements. A lot of times these hospitals don't expect payment in full at all, but any sort of payment is really key. So they may take $20 a month. They may ask, I know for a hospital here in Lincoln, not Bryan, I won't say their name, but they'll say they require a certain amount to keep out of collection. So your payment has to be a certain amount that they're requiring. It's not always the case. If you ask a lot of questions and ask for a manager, you can kind of negotiate your payment plan, because a lot of people just can't pay that, even the minimum that they're requiring, but they could pay something. And so paying something will keep you out of collections. There's often hardship qualifications when it comes to medical debt. Each medical provider has their own qualifications, but a lot of them will lower the payment or take a % off of the total balance based off the qualification. So if you have somebody, or you yourself, that maybe you don't make enough according to their qualifications, you actually could get your debt lowered. And you don't have to be in collections to do that. This is to keep out of collections. You could call them, let them know your situation, and they'll lower it. I've seen medical debt be dropped by about 20 or 30% at any given time just by asking. Now, it's not guaranteed, and I'm not speaking for Union Bank at all, but this is the medical providers that are willing to drop your payments or your overall balance just to keep out of the collections process, because they're losing money when they're paying someone like UBT to try to collect on the debt. So with medical debt, it's always a good idea. I mean, the second you get out of the hospital, or you have a client that gets out of the hospital that they know they're going to have a bill, if they can call the hospital and let them know their hardship, they may qualify. I know for this hospital in particular that I was speaking of earlier, they will send you a packet of paperwork with the qualifications just to see. They want to know your budget. They want to know why you can't pay. I know for Bryan, In particular, they actually have a committee that if you request a lower payment or a certain percent off of your bill, they actually meet with this committee. I don't know how often, it might be weekly or monthly. And they kind of look at the cases and say, okay, well, this person can't do it, so let's lower it. Or sometimes they just forgive the debt completely. So it's actually worth trying to get your medical debt reduced or just to go away. But you have to be honest about your finances, and not everybody will qualify, but there may be something in it for you. Something important though, make sure you're communicating with the medical provider. And this could be a doctor's office too. This doesn't have to be a hospital, but they're usually willing to work with you just to keep your situation out of collections. Cause like I said, it's costing the medical provider money in order to try to collect on your payments. And then keeping your debt out of collections is the utmost importance to the medical provider and to you, because once it hits collections, it's put on your credit report. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of what that does to affect your credit. It's actually not as bad as some people think, as long as they can get it paid off. Any questions on medical debt before I move on? Okay, so vehicle debt. So for banks that give the loans for vehicles, they usually have some sort of collections process that they work with. So this is very specific to UBT, but it's a very general idea of how it works too. So if you're between 20 and 30 days overdue, so one payment overdue, you're going to start getting the phone calls, text messages, voicemail, emails. One of the things UBT said to me when I was asking about their process is they said, we try to jump on this immediately because there is some grace period involved, and we want to know. We'd rather know at the beginning rather than when you're 6 months overdue, because at that point it's, going to go into repossession. But they said, we will call any form of communication, the numbers, email addresses, they're going to start communicating when it's just overdue. And then at the 30-day point, so the 1 month overdue point, they will report that to credit bureaus as either a late payment or an overdue payment or a no pay. So they have to report it. At 60 days past due, so 2 months behind, a referral is immediately sent to a repossession company to repossess the vehicle. This is where it's very key that if you can't pay, and we'll see it on the next slide, if you can't pay, if you're behind, calling the company immediately will keep you from repossession. So even if you're 15 days late, calling the bank is going to be really important, because there's things that they can do to keep you from collections or from a repossession. So some of the things that UBT does specifically, and again, I'm not trying to do a sales pitch for UBT, I just want to talk through the process of UBT. But what they can actually do is lower your payments for 3 months. They'll just lower it. So if you're having a hardship, they'll just lower it for 3 months. So maybe you're paying $200, they can lower it to, $150, just to kind of take some of that hardship off of you. They'll do a hardship extension, which means one skip payment every 6 months up to 5 times for the life of the loan. So really, if somebody is just having a hardship and just can't pay this month, but could next month, we could just do a skip payment. And this is prior to this going to a repossession. So this is just a kind of a good deed that UBT is willing to do to not affect your credit, to make sure things stay out of collections, things like that. So it's actually going to help us to help you in the long run. They can also change the loan terms. So what they do is they go back to the original time frame. So for an example, say you got a 60-month loan on your vehicle, but you're halfway through it, you've paid 30 months. What they can do is take that balance that you have left, that 30 months, and actually refinance it to be another 60 months. So you're basically dropping that by half of your payments. So no matter where you are in your countdown for repayment, they can refinance it and go back to your original loan term. So it's going to be longer than 60 months that you're going to be paying on this car, but it can drop your payments significantly depending on where you are. So that's a big plus, and that's something they're willing to do based off hardship qualifications rather than in collections. So if things go into collections, if it's been several months of no payments, they're not necessarily super keen on making these major adjustments. They might be willing to do a skip payment or something like that. But the earlier you communicate with your loan provider, the better, and the more willing they're going to be to work with you. When I was talking to one of the loan officers about this and one of the collection supervisors, she said it's so scary for people to call the provider, whether it's because their stuff is in collections or they're trying to stay out of collections, because it's humiliating for people to say, I can't pay. But it's really super important that you do, because they're so willing to work with their customers when there's communication involved. So if they're not tracking you down and people are making the first step in calling, they're willing to work with you. So we got to start kind of shifting our mindset when it comes to debt of, if I just communicate, people are actually going to work with me to make this work. So I would just encourage people to think about that. If this was ever the case with you or someone that you know, just make the call, see what you can do. The worst case scenario is you're back to square one prior to that call and there's nothing they can do, but there likely is something. So how repossession works is, after that 60 days of no payment, so two months of no payment, they are going to send a referral to a repossession company. And depending on the repossession company's timeline, you could get your car repossessed that day, or it might take a couple weeks. It really just depends, or when they find you. So a lot of people like to just take off with their car and not be found. But what it means is they're going to take possession of the car that the bank basically owns because of the loan, and they're going to resell it. But the original person who had that car is still responsible for the difference between how much the bank was able to sell the car and the loan balance. So a lot of people think, well, if I'll just get my car repossessed or even surrender my car, a lot of people will do that. If they can't pay on the loan, they'll surrender it because they think, well, this is going to keep me out of collections. It's going to keep my car from being repossessed and my credit going down. Well, you're still responsible for some of that loan, depending on how much the bank can recover, which they can never recover 100%. So that's where a lot of people go wrong, and they don't realize that repossession doesn't take you off the hook. You're still responsible, and that's when you get into collections and garnishing of wages, things like that. So repossession is not your easy way out at all, but prior to repossession, you will get your letters, emails, phone calls, letting people know. I know at the repossession point, they said that they will try to track down family members just to see where you are. They gave me an example that they had a repossession in the referral situation, and someone at the bank or something actually found the car. They just kind of ran into it somewhere, and they called the repossession company and they said, hey, the car's right here in this parking lot. And the company came out to get it. So they had actually been tracking down this car, and just by happenstance came across it. They called the tow company and they came and got it. So they'll go to great lengths. I know at UBT, we have people that actually go out to your home if they can't get a hold of you on the phone. Preventative work. They're trying to keep your car with you and try to make arrangements. So they'll actually show up at your house just to try to help. I worked with someone who did it. There's a lot of fun stories with that. But really it's preventative care for you so that you can keep your car. Moral of the story is communicate with your lender, because there's likely something they can do to make all of this a lot easier for you and to prevent the actual repossession piece. Any questions about repossession? It's kind of a sticky conversation and everybody's different, like I said, but the gist of what happens is very similar. The timelines may be different if you go through maybe a bigger lender. I'm thinking Ford, how they finance their own cars. Maybe it's a little bit different when it's like a national based company, but locally that's what we do. So let's move into credit cards. Credit cards are a big one here at the bank. Their process for collections is once the credit card goes 30 days past due, so we're talking 1 month of no payment, they're going to actually turn off the credit card. And they do this because they're trying to prevent your balance from going up any higher. So it's actually helpful that they're turning off the credit card. The card must be paid, so that payment needs to be paid for it to be turned back on. So that's kind of your easy process right there. We're past due, they turn it off, just pay the payment and they'll turn it back on for you. But they really do it for your security and safety. Debt workouts. So this is rare. This is when they're trying to work out taking away your fees or rolling the balance into a loan. So rather than having a credit card, they're going to roll whatever you owe into a loan so that you can have a consistent payment, but you're not racking up more debt on the credit card. It's rare. They are willing to do it in some cases, but it's rare because in order to roll that balance into a loan, you have to go through the application process as if you're getting a personal loan. There are fees with the loan, so we roll that in, and they're going to check your credit. So a lot of times what they see is for folks that aren't able to pay on their credit cards, there's likely a history of no payments or lower credit history. And so they're not going to qualify for these loans. And it's not to say that everyone's like this, especially right now. We look at kind of our circumstances in the past 5 or 6 months and how the world has been turning. And it's not everyone's fault. It's not a lack of trying. It's really just job situations, things like that. So for a lot of people, having a set loan payment is a little bit easier than the unpredictable payments of a credit card as you rack up more debt. So they are willing to look into rolling that into a loan, and they'll take away some of the fees that were associated with your credit card in order to get your balance down. The best way to go if you have credit card issues or in the past, or know that possibly your income is a little choppy and you can't pay the payments on a regular basis, is doing a secured credit card. This really helps people keep their credit clean and actually build credit, plus keep things out of collections, because the secured credit cards are really, you're putting a deposit down. You're saying, I need a $500 limit on my credit card. Here's $500. And then once you get that card with a $500 balance, you can spend on it. You're going to make payments on it. But if you skip a payment, they just take it out of your initial $500 that you put down. This is how people build credit. It's a really great way to build credit because you're putting up the collateral. Once you close your secured credit card, you'll get that $500 back, pending there's no balance. So it's kind of just saying, here, I'm going to put a down payment on my credit card as the collateral, but you're building your credit in the meantime. This is a great way for young folks to build their credit if they're trying to and want a credit card. It's a very, very great way because they can say, I only want a $300 balance, or they could say, I want a $1,500 balance. They just have to come to the table with that cash. So it's really up to them what they want to put down on these. But a great, great way, especially Amy, if you've got some people that are looking to build their credit, secured credit card is a great way. And you can't go into collections with that. Any questions on the credit card piece? Okay. So checking accounts. I learned a couple things since I started this job, and one of them is that checking accounts can go into collections. Who knew? So if there's overdraft fees made on to an account, after 60 days, a negative account will just be closed with UBT. So I know that there's a lot of banks that will do this. Their timeline may be different, but if there's overdraft fees, meaning nobody has really done anything to this account, they're just spending, after 60 days, they're going to close the account. They are going to try to recoup this money, though, with collections. They are willing, very willing, if you have overdraft fees, just to call, and sometimes they'll forgive some of them. So maybe you had 5 in one day. This happens a lot. They'll forgive 3 of them or 4 of them. Some banks, I know a bank in particular, a national bank, that will give you a couple for free. So your first 3 or 4 overdraft fees, they'll actually just take them away. But for a customer that has a negative account and it's closed, your account will be reported to Check System. So Check System is this huge system that every bank looks at. It's kind of like the credit reporting system of a bank. So they're going to look at if accounts were closed, if there's balances. This is where everybody's name goes when an account is closed that they didn't have any say over. So as some people would say, if you've been blacklisted by a bank, your name is in the check system and why it happened, and any bank has access to that. So just because you have a bad banking history at one bank doesn't mean you can just go across the street and open up a checking account somewhere else. They'll look at this check system. But here's the really great thing about check system and even being blacklisted by a bank is that you can get your name off of that very quickly, actually. Once you've paid your fees and brought your account balance current. So let's say UBT closed your account because you have $500. You went negative $500. You can actually go to any bank. They'll look in the check system names. They'll look at that and they'll say, oh, at UBT, you still owe them $500. So you can go back to UBT, pay that off that day, get a letter from them saying, yes, we're going to report this back to check system and its name will be taken off of the list. It usually takes about a month if you don't get the letter, but a lot of banks will honor a letter from any bank saying this was paid in full. They should qualify to open up a checking account. So it's really not that hard to be able to bank again when maybe you haven't. My brother-in-law, for instance, when he was younger, he had several overdraft fees that he wouldn't pay. He only owes about $150. And I was explaining this process to him and he still doesn't want to do it, but he can't get a bank account anywhere because his name is in the check system. And I just keep telling him it's $150. Go pay it off, get a letter and go open up a checking account somewhere. You can do it, or you can wait a month and you don't even need the letter and just walk into a bank and then they'll do it. So it clears your name from this system. So that's really great for a lot of people who have the fear of, well, I've blown it with a bank. I can't get back in. You can, you just need to pay your fees. I had somebody at Community Corrections actually come to me with this same issue, and they owed a lot of money and they're working on getting it fixed because they went down to UBT, they pulled their check system information, got the exact amount, and Community Corrections is working with this gentleman to help them get it paid off so they can get their finances in order and get a bank account and do what is right. So it's really not a hard process, but not many people know about it. So there is a way to clear your name with the bank if you have gone negative. One of the big important things though, especially in your checking account, is to communicate with your bank. There's no shame in calling and saying, I totally forgot and I overdrafted and I have these 3 fees. Is there anything you can do? I actually had this happen. I have overdraft protection, but they tied it to the wrong account. So I went negative in my account. I mean, this is like 2 weeks ago. And I called, we found the mistake. It wasn't that the money wasn't there. It was just in the wrong account. And they forgave it for me, the 2 charges I had. So it was just communicating with them, owning up to the situation. They actually fixed the overdraft protection for me, which means they pull it from my savings when it's not in my checking to cover the balance. So they switched it to the right account. We made the corrections and they forgave the 2 overdraft fees and I was good to go. So it's just a matter of communicating, and even people who have a handle on their finances, this still happens. So communicating with your bank is really key.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you overdraft, do you have a system or an option set up? I'm just curious because with my bank, I overdrafted a whole bunch and it kept going more and more negative just because I had some automatic payments going through for my business account actually. And eventually it was ridiculous. I got down to like negative $300. Mm-hmm. And this was like a week and a half after I even realized that. Mm-hmm. You guys have a system where like the bank will call you or like email you or something?
Some banks do and some banks don't. It's all a part of the overdraft protection that they offer. So UBTs may look a little bit different. With a business account, I'm a little surprised that nobody called, honestly. You're not with UBT though. So, and I can't speak for UBT, but I'm kind of wondering if there's a certain point when they call, like a certain limit. Maybe you overdraft by 1,000 and that's when they give you a call. Because I have heard of banks calling, but maybe it's just a minor balance that they just thought he's got a good payment history. There's no reason.
Possibly. Yeah.
But that's the type of thing that you call. Maybe they'll forgive a couple of your overdraft payment or overdraft fees, but then they'll set up that overdraft protection depending on what you're looking for. So I've just learned over the years too, that if you're asking the questions to say, how can I prevent this in the future? What can I do? What kind of products do you do you have? Banks are willing to work with you because, again, it's not them chasing you down, it's you chasing them down.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that you're a good customer and that you're trying, you've just made some mistakes. And so they're willing to work with you and offer that. Some banks, though, charge for overdraft protection. I was with a bank once that every time they had to pull from my savings, they charged me $10. But the silver lining is the overdraft fee was $36. So I was saving $26 when I would do that. So, which was good because I was in college and I couldn't afford it. So, so every bank has something a little bit different. So it's worth calling them in the meantime and just asking, because they might forgive some of that overdraft too. But that's a really good question. Thank you. All right. Any other questions on checking accounts? No. Okay. Couple more slides here. Just really important for anyone in financial trouble. And this could be the richest person out there, but maybe they lost their job. Any financial trouble or any financial changes, just call your bank. Build a relationship with them. UBT, I know, is one of the rare banks that love to see you face to face. They want to know your name. They want to know your story. We build relationships with customers constantly. That's something we pride ourselves on. And so if somebody knows your story, knows kind of the hardships you're going with, they're going to be willing to work with you based off your history. So it's better to just call them. Debt collectors would rather get to know your situation than repossess or close your accounts. So again, calling them, letting them know. And I am a big fan of calling more than once and talking to someone different, because you're going to get a different perspective. So some people are really good with the credit cards, or some people are really good with the cars, but maybe you just have a general question. So calling and talking to someone different, you might learn something new, or asking for a supervisor the next time. So get to know your bank and who's there, and ask questions from different perspectives, because you might find out that there's a product that can help you in the future, or someone can forgive a overdraft fee when maybe the original person that you talked to can't. So, but just calling is going to be key, especially prior to things going into collections. Try to prevent that with a phone call. And when in doubt, call me and I'll help you call. That's something that I can do. We'll get on a conference call. If you have a client that needs some help, or you yourself need some help, call me. We can talk through some things. I can get the right person on the phone and go, talk through it with you if it's a little scary, because it's scary. And it's humbling to say I'm having some financial difficulties, but that's why we're here. That's why we're a bank. We're here to help you. Keep information updated with your creditor. This is at the beginning, getting any loan, getting any sort of banking account. Keep your information updated, because the longer they have to track you down, the less time you have to keep yourself out of collection. So it's very important to just go online, update your account. Everything is online, so it's easy. You don't have to talk to someone, or you can certainly call to get that updated. We take calls all the time, people just updating their address. So it's really important to do that. And you should, and you will always at UBT, but you should at other banks, be notified in advance when you have missed payments or delinquencies. You should be warned. You should be called prior to a collections situation. I have heard stories, I have experienced, especially my college age, things ending up in collections that I had no idea existed. I had no idea I had the bill, and they said that they called me or wrote me, and I never did. And I just, it's so irritating to me that someone can affect my credit without contacting me. So it's something that UBT we will do. Other banks, I can't promise it, but you should. I believe by law they have to contact you. But if you're contacting them immediately when a hardship comes up, you may not even, at the beginning, here's an example. At the beginning of this pandemic, I was worried about my job and my husband's job, just like everyone else. Are we going to have jobs during this? And one of the things I started doing was, well, can we skip a car payment, to just save some more money? Is there something else that we can do? Call the bank, let's find out. So kind of some preventative care rather than being reactionary to our circumstances. So when a hardship hits you financially, it's best to just call, see what we can do. Maybe we can skip a payment or something like that. But we want to, here at UBT, we want to keep you out of collections because we know that you're going to have to dig yourselves out of a credit situation. So we'd rather not have to do that. And it costs us a lot of money also to deal with the collection side. So we'd prefer just working with you to be proactive. If you finance a car loan, and you put money on top of that, so maybe you owed a little bit more on your old car and you're rolling that into the loan. It happens all the time. We hear car folks on the radio say, we'll pay off your car no matter how much you owe. Well, you're still going to roll some of that debt into your new car loan. We would strongly encourage you to get what's called gap insurance. It's something usually you can purchase through your car dealership. What it does is if you were to drive off that car lot and ruin your car, your insurance is only going to pay for your car, not for the rest of that loan. So gap insurance pays for whatever is on top of your loan. So it might cost you a little bit more every month. I don't know how much it runs, but it's kind of worth it if you're putting money on top of a loan. And that keeps you out of collections too. So your insurance company may cover the cost of your car, but then say you have an extra $3,000-$4,000 on top of it that you have no car and you just have this random loan. So that's going to keep you out of collections. One of the big things that I've learned, there is a lot of rules and laws around somebody dying and their credit cards or loans or something that they owe. How does that work if somebody dies? Does the family have to pay off the loans? How does that work? Every bank is different. Every situation is different as far as if it's a car or a checking account or a loan. But if somebody dies, contact their bank immediately because they can shut down all of the accounts to make sure there's no fees accruing or anything like that. But when somebody dies, contact the bank or the lenders immediately and let them know that this has happened. I have been told that there are some situations that they just forgive the debt and it's done because as long as there's no cosigner on it, because there's nothing they can do about it. The person is deceased. But sometimes you have to take it out of their estate. So if they have any money that they're giving to their family or a house, you'll have to move some of that to pay off their debt. But sometimes they won't do it. They'll actually just pay it off. So, or close the account. So it's worth calling to see if you have to continue paying on it or pay it off, or if it can just go away, because there are situations where it will just go away. So don't miss out on that. Cosigners on any loan are still responsible for the debt. This is a big one. I'm hearing it a lot with our younger folks right now that they are co-signing for each other. They don't have great credit, but it's established credit. It's not bad credit. It's just not great. And so they're co-signing for one another at an early age, and then one of them doesn't pay on it. And so be really wise when co-signing. Don't co-sign if it's, I would say, I would discourage any young person from co-signing a loan for anyone. We see a lot of kids co-signing for their parents because their parents have bad credit, but the kids don't. And when I say kids, I mean 18 to 25, where they've got established credit, and it will help their parents. But it's a really sticky situation because if the parents or the original loan person does not pay on the loan, the cosigner is responsible, and it will hurt their credit, and it will go into collections, and their name will be on it no matter what. So all of the repercussions of taking out a loan and not paying on it still apply to a cosigner, and people just don't understand that, and they're not being told that when they're co-signing, that they're 100% responsible. So school loans is a big one because a lot of parents will co-sign for the school loans, and they are responsible. And actually having a parent co-sign for school loans, a lot of the time you can't get skip payments or forbearance or anything like that with your school loan, because according to the lender, your parents should be able to afford to pay on that. So a lot of the things that they're willing to do for a skip payment, they won't do if you have a cosigner, because together you should be able to make the payment. So if you can prevent having a cosigner, do it. The way to do that is to get a secured credit card and start building up your credit at an early age. There's there's less liability with that secure credit card. And so it gives you an opportunity to build your credit easily at an early age, 18, and we can do younger, but typically it's 18. And then you can prevent having to need a cosigner. But for those who have good credit and are eligible to be a cosigner, be very, very cautious of who you do that for. All right, so that is the presentation on collections. I love questions. I love scenarios. Feel free to contact me, especially if you do have a good story or a situation, because I love using it in future presentations if you'll allow me to, just for folks to learn from real life situations. But if you are caught in a collection situation and you have questions but are afraid to call because it can be very scary, I get it. Give me a call first and we'll talk through it and I'll get you to the right person. Even if it's not you don't bank with UBT, I can't connect you with the right person, but I can certainly help guide you in the process of getting some stuff cleared up or taken care of on your end with your bank. So feel free to call me. Here's my contact information. But does anybody have any questions from here? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And throw some people my way if they have some questions. I love them. So thanks, everyone.